feels like I haven't filmed one of these in absolutely ages, and that's probably right. Obviously I had the YA Author Awareness Week, and then there was Christmas and some other things came up, so I just haven't had the time to kind of sit down and film anything. However, I thought it'd be really fun to do my top books from 2021. I thought that it has in fact been a lot harder than I thought it might be. 2021 has been like an incredible reading year. Like, I don't think I've read anything that was like bad at all. And I've read a lot of books that I adored and absolutely loved. So I've tried to narrow it down to a top 10, but this top 10 has changed probably 15 times since I had the idea to do this, and will probably continue to change from this point. So I had to force myself to stop kind of looking at it and just go with what I had on the page at the time. But yeah, there are so many books that I read this year that could have gone on this list. So without further ado, I'll jump into the top 10, and I will admit that it's technically a top 11, but I think I've managed to, like, there's a reason for that, and I hope you'll allow me to get away with it, but we shall see. So the choice I'm hoping I will get away with is Only a Monster. Now, the reason I'm hoping you'll let me get away with this is because it doesn't actually come out until February the 1st, I believe. I just was extremely lucky to read a ebook proof of it this year, and honest to God, it is so good. It's got everything you can want. It's got a romance that doesn't interfere with the plot, merely adds to it. The fantasy world is incredible. There's themes about humanity and monsters and what actually makes a monster, and it's just so good. And I don't want to say much more than that because I'm very cheekily adding this to a list of 10 books, and it doesn't technically come out until February, but it was so good. I honestly think it was one of like my top reads of the year, like top 5 or even higher. So I had to mention it because if you like YA fantasy with time travel and unique magic and monsters and enemies and a plot that plays with the idea of who the real monsters are, then Only a Monster is for you. And I honestly can't wait for the second one to come out, which is really frustrating because the first one's technically not even out yet, which means I'll be waiting a long time for the second one. But yeah, I just had to mention it. Now, this next book is a pretty recent read, but it definitely had to make it onto this list. And no, it's not just because it's orange, and that is Jade Fire Gold. Although, saying that, I am starting to see a very positive turn in the use of orange on covers and the books therefore being incredible, not because they're orange, but they just seem to be good books. Obviously we've got Jade Fire Gold, and that's orange and red. We've got Iron Widow, which is red and orange, and we've got The Priory of the Orange Tree, which is orange, and they are all some of my favourite books. So, you know, I'm starting to see a trend, and I'm going to go with that trend. So in future, any orange YA books, just going to have to go on my TBR because I'm starting to see a theme. Maybe they just know that they're the books for me. So Jade Fire Gold is a fantasy novel filled with Chinese mythology, politics, characters who you root for from page 1. It's absolutely incredible. There's magic, it follows the repercussions of war incredibly well, and focuses on our 2 main characters. One who is nothing and one who is the forgotten, lost heir to the Empire. And oh my god, it is so good. Like, this book is more than just a fantasy. It's so well written. There's quotes in here that just like made my brain be like, they're just so good. My favourite quote though has to be, and I'm gonna have to read this because I don't know it off by heart, but the priests in the palace have done too good a job at erasing the true history of the Empire. Pages can be burned, words erased, scribes can be persuaded to write new tales, new books, a new past to suit the agenda of those in power. History is never written by its victims. I mean, this book, like, what I always have loved about fantasy is the way that it can mirror the real world and give lessons, even though you're in this completely magical world that's been built up from myth and legends or just out of somebody's head. And this is absolutely incredible. So we're in a world, an empire on the brink of war, and these 2 main characters are central to the story and the empire, but they don't exactly know that yet. I adore them both. They're both incredible characters who are just as incredible and full of life when they're apart as when they're together, which is incredible to see in a YA book. Sometimes I think characters get thrown together too quickly, but this was incredible. The characters came together and went apart and came together, and they were both as strong and incredible together as they were apart. This book's just magical. It's incredible and I adore it. And it's also orange, and it's also orange underneath, and I feel like anything that is ever written by this author will immediately go on my TBR list because this was incredible. Next up, we have a book from an auto by author for me, and that is Once Upon a Broken Heart. Now, the blurb alone would have made me buy this, but ever since I read her previous series, I have been obsessed with her writing. It's lyrical and fairy tale like, and it always has a twist, and it's dark and beautiful and everything all at the same time. So when I saw she was bringing a new book out, I had to order it, to the point that it came in the shop, because I'd ordered it without even looking at the blurb, and then I read the blurb and realised that it followed the story of Jax, the Prince of Hearts, and was like wishing for the day to be over so I could get home and read this. And I actually read it in a night on the day that it was released, so it's incredible. It's based on the premise of how far would you go for your happily ever after. So we follow our main character who believes she's in love with this man who suddenly is engaged to her sister and will do anything to stop the wedding, including making a deal with Jax, who is a fate. Now, anyone knows in this world that we are in that making deals with fates isn't always a very good idea. They're tricksy and mischievous and just a bit morally grey, I'd say, and we follow the story from there. It's incredible. I absolutely adore it. I don't want to say much more because I think like it's just so good. There's morally grey characters. There's Jax, who is in her previous series as kind of like a side character, but you don't have to read that to read this. It's so good. I love it. It's beautiful, and I was very lucky also to get one of the first edition ones that have the secret hidden covers. I was very tempted to try and get all of them, I must admit, but I resisted. It was very, very good. I resisted. But yeah, this is fairy tale-like with a dark, mysterious twist that is just incredible. And yet again, she has created a book that I absolutely adore, and I cannot wait for the second one to come out, which title has just been announced and escapes me at this current moment. But I will definitely have that on pre-order the second that I can pre-order it, because I need it. So this next book should come as no surprise to anybody that knows me, has spoken to me, or ever even looked at my Instagram page, because I never stop talking about this, because when I read it, it absolutely blew my socks off, and that is Iron Widow. Now, not only is this book absolutely gorgeous, I mean, it's got orange tones in there, so obviously it was going to be a winner, but this is an incredible kind of sci-fi historical genius of a book. There wasn't a single thing I didn't like about this, which surprised me because usually I'm not a sci-fi person at all. Like, I can watch films, but I always found when reading books it just didn't capture me the same way as a fantasy, which is strange, I'll admit, but I've always found I could fall really well into fantasies and find them quite realistic, even though it's magic, and therefore, you know, maybe not the most realistic thing, but things like spaceships and that usually throw me out of the narrative. But this was something else. So if you're new to sci-fi and would like a YA sci-fi, this is the one to go for, because it is incredible. Like, everything in this book is just so good, from smashing the characters within the book, the main characters that we follow, smash the patriarchy and the government and all those systems that have been put in place to keep females down and subservient. The relationships in this are incredible. It's not your typical love triangle, it's a incredible polyamorous relationship. I just loved it. It's so good. I never want to tell people too much about this because I feel like you should just dive in and go for it. But this is definitely one of my top books of this year, and maybe out of all the books I've read as well. So it definitely had to be on this list. It is incredible. It is gorgeous. If you haven't read it yet, you should, because it blew my socks off and was incredible. And honestly, like, who doesn't want a sci-fi mashup that's just a reimagining of the only female Chinese emperor? You may not know you needed it, but I'm telling you, you did. Next up is a book that I don't think anyone will be surprised by, and that is Firekeepers Daughter. Now, this is a YA thriller that follows the story of a teen who witnesses a murder in her own community and has to solve it basically by going undercover with the help of the FBI to use both her cultural knowledge on her community and her scientific prowess to solve the crime and help catch the murderer. Now, this book is incredible and is based on the author's own community and culture, and you find out so much about that culture. It's a real beautifully written story with a dark mystery at its heart. It's absolutely incredible. I think I read this at the start of the year, like it was very early on I think, and I still think about it now. It's absolutely incredible. Honestly, it's one of those books that you'll end up just thinking about every so often. It won't ever fully leave your mind. It's absolutely gorgeous and everyone should read it, and I think it's actually coming out in paperback in January, so this month. So if hardcovers are not your thing, then it is out in paperback this month, so you should check it out. But it is absolutely incredible and kind of plays on the idea of communities and cultures and them getting involved with obviously westernized governments and control in the form of the FBI in this case. But it is an incredible read, full of twists that will break your brain, but it's so good. So if you're after a thriller, this is an incredible one to go for. I highly recommend it. I tell everyone about it, and it is out in paperback soon. And I mean, it's gorgeous. Like, I don't know about you, but I feel like book covers lately have just like stepped up a notch, especially in YA. They're just getting prettier and prettier to the point that you almost just want them sat on your shelves facing outwards rather than hidden in them. But yeah, if you're looking for a YA thriller, Firekeepers Daughter is a definite one to go for. Next up is a book you might recognise from UK YA Author Week, and that is The Boy I Am. Now, I adore this book. It's such a clever idea. The whole premise behind it and the plot is incredible. This is a speculative fiction that plays on gender roles and patriarchy, and flips it all on its head by putting the women in charge. It's absolutely incredible. There is a mystery thriller plot at its heart, and I adore it. It brings up so many questions and highlights so many things that happen in the world today, from how we treat women, but by twisting it and putting men in that situation and women on the top, it really highlights how bizarre it is and how we don't tend to acknowledge the small things that happen every day. There's things in this book that like have happened to me and people I know that I don't even really think about anymore. They're just part of the day and day, but when it's flipped on its head and happening in a way that isn't the everyday, in this case happening to men at the hands of women, it really highlights how much that sucks and how stupid and annoying it is. So this is an absolutely incredible book. I mean, if you love a thriller, you're gonna love this, but it's so much more than that. It's got so much to say. It's absolutely incredible. I love it. If you haven't read it, please do. It's absolutely incredible. And again, there's just going to be a lot of me like hugging the books this video, because they're my favourites, and you know, can't help myself. They are special. and therefore deserve to be loved. We have a book that honestly wasn't on my radar until it was sent to me by Ruth at Old Barn Books, and that is Ghostbird. Now, this book knocked me off my feet. It's a YA thriller written by a First Nations Australian author, which draws on her own cultural and spiritual beliefs within that culture and community, and it's not something that as a UK reader I often find in books, especially not YA ones. Honestly, it's one of those books that's almost an honour to read. It intertwines those typical thriller elements like the hunt for clues with exploration of ingrained racism, social and cultural taboos, and the facing down of all of these things in order to help save your own family. Now, this book is obviously a deeply personal novel, as Lisa Fuller explores her own community's cultural and spiritual beliefs. It's absolutely gorgeous. At its heart, it follows the story of Stacey and Lainey, who are twins. Now, one of them goes missing and her sister goes in the search for her. Everybody else just thinks she's run off and she's rebelling a little bit, but her twin sister knows that something's seriously wrong, and we follow that journey. Overall, this is just an incredible book that I'm so glad I was able to read this year. Like, it's absolutely gorgeous. The writing's incredible. It draws you in from the first page and doesn't let you go. It's fast-paced, incredible. You won't want to stop reading this, so I don't recommend reading it just before bed thinking you'll get a few chapters in, because that won't happen. You will be awake at 3 o'clock in the morning finishing the book. But yeah, Ghostbird definitely had to be on my top 10. Next book is not going to be a surprise to anyone really, because I've gone on about it for most of the year, and that is The Char Daughter. Now, I absolutely adore this book. It is a YA fantasy debut, and oh my god, I adore this book, and I am so glad that it's a trilogy and that the second book is now out. This is the kind of book that makes you wish 24-hour bookshops existed, so that when you finish it you can immediately go and get the next one. The kind of book that leaves you with so many feelings and wanting to read the next book even though it's not out for another year. That kind of book. It's absolutely incredible. I adored it. It's full of magic and political intrigue, revolution, and that magic's dark. So the magic in question is how the current emperor keeps control of his kingdom. He uses a thing called bone shard magic, which basically allows him to create puppets of varying degrees of intelligence and skill. So everything from people to sweep and clean the palace to his lieutenants that are spies and warriors and extremely clever and help him keep a grip on his kingdom. Now, his daughter has started to realise that her dad's maybe not the best emperor, and tries to find out more about this magic that he controls and she's trying to learn to control, and we go from there. I adore the characters in this book, the way it's written, the fantasy, like the world and the magic system are absolutely incredible and so unique and amazing, and I just love it. I love it. It's so good, and it's another one that if you haven't read yet, you definitely should. The second one's just come out, and then I'm hoping, if we're following the system, that it will be next year or the end of this year that the third one comes out. Fingers crossed, because I need it. It's one of those things though, it's like, I know this is a trilogy and I have the first book and I've read it, and I've got the second one and that's my next book to read, and then I know the third one's going to come out and I'm going to want to read it but also not want to read it because I kind of don't want it to end because this was so good. But yeah, if you haven't read it, just saying, it's a pretty good fantasy book. The next book on my list I don't currently have because I've lent to somebody, and that is When Shadows Fall. So you might remember this from the UK YA Author Awareness Week, but it's absolutely incredible. It's one of those books that felt like it was speaking to my very soul. It's an absolute gorgeous book that combines story and the written word with gorgeous illustrations, and yeah, it's beautiful. It will take your breath away and break your heart and then put it back together again. It's lyrical and gorgeous and will talk to your soul. It follows a group of friends who are exploring grief and illustrates a lot of how youth today can fall through the cracks in our world, and how the creative world and exploring oneself through arts or writing or through anything creative can help people deal with these emotions and grief and other things that they're going through in a really amazing way, and can help those people who are falling through the cracks in school systems and communities, and how communities can come together. It's a gorgeous book that I need everybody to read, because it says a lot about the world today, but it also is so hopeful in that it shows and highlights how the creative world can help and raise people up and allow people to raise themselves up. But yeah, it's incredible. I wish I could show you it. Maybe I will try and put a picture in this video, but I'm not promising anything because I've not tried to do that before. But the book itself is absolutely gorgeous. It will blow you away. The story and the plot is incredible, and the message and themes behind it even more so. So if you haven't checked it out, you definitely should. It was my YA pick for December, but it will all be linked down below, all the titles and where you can get them from. If you can't get to the shop that I work at, we have a bookshop.org page. But yeah, you should definitely check out When Shadows Fall. The author herself is absolutely incredible and one of the most lovely people I've ever spoken to. And the book, it's gorgeous, it's incredible. It will hurt your heart while filling it with hope at the same time. It's a very hard book to describe, but I adore it. Next up, we have an adult fantasy, and that is The Wolf and the Woodsman. Now, this book is absolutely incredible, and it is a debut. I honestly think that 2021 is the year of incredible debut books, because I've just read so many that have blown my socks off and become some of my favourite reads this year. So this book is absolutely incredible. Our main character is so lovable. She doesn't always make the best choices, and she's not exactly the purest of heart, shall we say, but she is fierce, and you can't help but root for her. She is so strong and unbreakable. So while she doesn't always make the best choices, you can't help but root for her. This world is incredible. It obviously takes influences from the real world and cultures and events that have happened in our past, and interweaves these with an incredible story. I don't want to say too much more than that, because I think the brilliance of this book is hard to explain, and it just needs to be read. But at the start of our book, our main character is betrayed and sent into the woods as a blood sacrifice, and we kind of follow on from there. It's absolutely incredible and gorgeous. So the writing's beautiful. If you haven't read it, this is just me again saying you should, because it's great. Last book, I hope I've kept it to 10. I've just grabbed the pile and I've been going from there, so I'm hoping I've stuck to 10, but this next book definitely had to be on there. Again, it's a relatively recent read for me, but it's absolutely incredible, and I actually walked into a door reading this book, which is always a sign of a great book, and that is Skin of the Sea. Now again, this is a debut. It's absolutely incredible and I love it. This is no mere Little Mermaid retelling. This blends together elements from actual history, African mythology, and pulls it all into a fantastical world that will grab your attention and make you want to visit. It's absolutely incredible. This book is so fast paced, but without neglecting any other element of the story. It's dark and magical and everything that you could want. It's absolutely beautiful. Our main character is a mermaid who collects the souls of those who have lost at sea, but then one day she does the unthinkable. She saves a boy. Now this goes against everything she's been taught and should do, and puts her in direct conflict with the gods, and we follow the story from there. This book's incredible. It's told using flashbacks and incredible writing. Every page has so carefully been put together. The influences from the real world and our own history are gorgeous and add so much to the story. All in all, this is so much more than The Little Mermaid. It's incredible. The influence from The Little Mermaid is there, but it's been weaved in such a way with such incredible elements that, like, it's better than the original. Am I allowed to say that it's better than a well-known classic? But yeah, I adored this. So if you haven't picked this up yet, so that's my top 10/10 plus one book that comes out this year of 2021. Yeah, I couldn't help putting Only a Monster in there. I know it doesn't come out until February, but I adored it, and I read it this year. But then I suppose I could have put it in the top 10, but then the other 10 books were so good that I kind of had to talk about those as well. So yes, I cheated. I'm sorry, but I can't help it. So yeah, that's it for today. I will be back with some more videos now that it's the new year. I will be bringing back like my monthly roundups and anticipated reads for each month and anything else that I think of. Going forward from obviously the UK YA Author Week, there's gonna be more author interviews and things up on this channel and on my Instagram as well. Everything will be linked in the description. But yeah, I will see you next time. Bye.